Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inter Show. This one is being recorded using Skype Recorder, which hopefully will hopefully mean a big improvement in recording quality and audio for our listeners. We've got Anthony joining us from Australia, Alessandro, who lives in San Francisco, as you know, but he's actually in Italy at the moment, and Ian from Belfast, who I would have spoken about in the last couple of episodes, who's setting up a club there. So we're going to talk about the various matches that have been played this week, mainly focusing, of course, on Inter, but we might focus on a couple of other matches because there's been some interesting occurrences, particularly with our what word could I use to describe Juventus? There's been a few funny things going on there, I think. And then we will preview the Sampdoria match. It's been a big bag this week. Obviously, the match with Tottenham was very emotional. Well, it was very emotional for most people. I have to admit that I was still a bit miserable after it, because I still don't see a performance having been put in this season so far. But I know that you guys were very enthusiastic about it. To start with you, Ian, because you're the new member. What's your opinion of the match against Spurs?
I actually thought the performance wasn't great. I have to say, like the passing of the Icardi, it just wasn't connecting. We started the match pretty well. We were pressing them high up the pitch, and we did well in the first half. And then about halfway through the first half, they started to take over. But like at the end, I'm so glad we got the win because we needed the confidence boost.
And do you think that it is going to be a turning point? Because there's been a lot of talk in the press about it being the turning point for the season. I remain to be convinced, because I really didn't think the performance was there, but an awful lot of people are saying that this is what's going to change the course of the season. Do you think it will? And how do you think that's going to manifest itself?
First of all, I hope it will. But I tend to think like you. I think it might be paper over the cracks a little bit. But I think in the next game away to Sam, we'll see in the lineup. So we'll see how much continuity we keep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing I would say about the Sampdoria match is you can always be fairly confident with Icardi against Sampdoria. He tends to bang them in against his old club. Alessandro, I think you were very enthusiastic on Tuesday at the result again rather than the performance. Have you got any more confidence than us two have?
At this point, I have no idea what's going to happen this year. Pata Inter is back. Against Parma, I think they play a better soccer than against Tottenham, but the result were completely opposite. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen from now on. Spalletti is saying that the game in Champions League was a turning point. So far, whatever he said at the end of the day was right. So I hope he's right, he's correct this time as well. So we'll see just in a few hours what's going to happen against Sampdoria.
And Anthony?
I was silently as pessimistic as you were, Andrew, after the Parma match. But, obviously with the kickoff in Australia being at such an inconvenient time for me, 2:55, when the first goal went in via Ericsson, obviously my heart sank and I started to think about other things besides the football match, like, how are my energy levels going to be today? How am I going to function well? Is this going to set the tone for a very uncomfortable week mentality-wise? So I guess seeing Icardi hit that goal in at 84 and then the Vecino goal, it wasn't just a resurrection for Inter for me. It was a new burst of life, a new resurrection for my entire week. So that really set the tone for the whole week. And that's probably why I haven't come down from that cloud yet, because had we not come back in that match, it would have just been another week or another few days where I'm really trying to catch up on sleep and trying to bring some more positivity back into my world. So Pazza Inter never left, Alessandro. That's something I'm absolutely sure of, and it's going to be here every single week till the rest of the season. So at least we have each other, right, guys?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a lot of people, obviously the famous match, I suppose, most famous comeback match was the one with Sampdoria when we beat them 3-2 with 3 goals very late on in the match. The one that sticks in my mind, probably as much because I was actually at it than anything else, was the 4-3 against Siena when Snyder equalised with about 3 minutes of normal time to go, and then Walter Samuel scored in the 93rd, 94th minute. And
wow, were you at that game, Andrew? Sorry
I was, yeah.
Were you at that? Oh, that's awesome, man.
And I was in the Curva, and the atmosphere was just electric at the end. And especially, I would say that it was probably the best atmosphere that I'd ever been in the sense that if you go to the derbies, if you go to the matches with Juventus, yeah, of course the atmosphere is electric, but if you go against the likes of Siena, then you're talking about really the diehards being at it rather than those that have gone because the derby is so attractive. I mean, I've been to plenty of derbies myself, and I've been to plenty of matches with Juventus, but there's that real sort of vibe that everyone is completely bought into this when you've got a smaller attendance, the atmosphere can be better. And I just remember that match will always stick in my mind, particularly because you thought that if we lose at home to Siena, then what course is the season going to take? And I think the season really kicked on from that point. I've been very pessimistic all week. I think but completely jarring with that. I think we're going to beat Sampdoria tomorrow. And the simple reason for me saying that is because Icardi always performs against Sampdoria, or almost always performs against Sampdoria. And he just loves to score against his old team. There's bad blood there over the Maxi Lopez thing, although Maxi Lopez himself has moved on. The fans have always been kind of nasty with Icardi since he left Sampdoria, and he loves nothing more than sort of to put them back in their place, I suppose. Alessandro, how do you see tomorrow going?
I hope for the best. I think after the last game, the morale of the team is really high, and hopefully, I think everybody is back from the injuries, so we should have a good game. And if Asamoah, Icardi, Nainggolan, they're playing, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to win.
Yeah, there is. I read this morning, and that's. I'm just trying to locate it now. There is somebody who's out. Vasalico is out. Vasalico is not going to be playing tomorrow. That's almost a certainty. Other than that, I think everybody is coming back, and even Martinez is going to be available.
If I can add one thing,
yeah,
really quickly, I love Skriniar as right back. It's like the best thing of the game, in my opinion, aside of the goal of the scene, of course.
Yeah, the strangest thing is, I think we all agreed on that, but if you look at it, at Gazzetta the day after the Tottenham match, they sort of really rubbished Skriniar's performance. Said it wasn't his fault because he's not a right back, but so gave him 5.5, and really the comments about him were negative. I know Alessandro and Anthony, you completely disagree with that.
Yeah, I
Anthony,
completely disagree with that as well.
where would you pick up on that being an incorrect verdict, Anthony?
Well, I think it's an incorrect verdict because it's not put into context at all. This is the first time that Skriniar has debutized at right back, and yeah, it wasn't a 10 out of 10 performance, but I'd say as a debutant right back, it was a 7 out of 10 performance. He was more aggressive taking on the one-on-one attackers that were coming onto him. He can distribute the ball out and dribble it out a lot better than D'Ambrosio. You know, for me, I was comparing him to D'Ambrosio, which in my opinion is a fair comparison because he is our only other fit right back. So when you put Skriniar's performance against a performance that D'Ambrosio would have had, I would still pick Skriniar 9 times out of 10. I think his competency as a defender overall translates into competency in other areas onto the park, whether it's shifting a few yards to the right, a few yards into a left centre back rather than a right centre back, even pushing up into a right defensive mid role. He is such a versatile, strong go-getter who is very, very goal orientated as well. If he has a job to do, he's just so tenacious in doing it. And I just find him to be 10 times more competent than D'Ambrosio is at any sort of fullback position. So while he's not the finished product, and I would still be very much looking forward to Shimi Vesaliko coming back, it's once again nice to know that Milan Skriniar has got our back, left, right, centre.
And Ian, you were coming in there. How did Gazzetta's opinion jar with your own?
Well, listen, he's up against a good player in Son, who's just coming off the win at the Olympics, was it? For his country?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so he's coming up against a foreign player. He had him in his pocket the whole game. Skriniar didn't have a problem until Lucas Moura came on the pitch.
Yeah,
Other than that, obviously, he was there just to defend. He didn't go forward, which left pretty much a big hole in the right wing, because when you get the likes of Politano coming in off the right-hand side and at their foot, it leaves a big space where he was for right back to go into. But other than that, I mean, I thought it was a pretty solid performance for him.
And going forward in the Champions League, how would you, given that I don't want to put too much of a dampener on it. I think I did that on Tuesday night because I still hadn't recovered properly from the Saturday. But going forward, if we're bearing in mind that we've got to go to London, we've got to play Barcelona both home and away. PSV, I still hesitant to say that they'll be the whipping boys of the group. Having said that, obviously Barcelona did beat them pretty heavily. I still think, particularly in Holland, they're gonna have some kind of say in the panning out of the group. Given that really Tottenham probably dominated for 80-85 minutes, and then we just had that 5 minutes that one of them had. How do you see it going forward?
Oh, going forward, I mean, the home matches are key. If we win our home matches, then you probably need just to pick up maybe a point at PSV or a point at Spurs. Taking a defeat off Barcelona, it happens, it's football, but we're well capable of going there and getting something as well. So,
do you think
the home games are paramount? The home game have to win their home games.
Do you think beating Barcelona at home is realistic, given that we struggled against Tottenham?
Well, hopefully we'll get a bit of form by the time we play them, and maybe it's a different picture. Maybe we have players that go into form, like Lautaro might come back from injury and be ahead like he was in the pre-season. So I don't see why not. I mean, closer to the time you're going to see that.
Yeah. Is there an engine or something going on in the background on someone's end?
There is. Sorry, I'm trying to move away from that now, Andrew. Got a few
problem.
construction things happening outside my house.
No problem. going back to you, Alessandro, how confident are you that we'll be able to progress from this group now, following the result against Spurs?
I totally agree with Ian. It depends what we're doing at home. I really nothing to add. I think that was the perfect read. If we're able to do 9 points home and collect 1 or 2 points out, that's it. I mean, we should be able to pass, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, you would expect 10 points to be enough to push us forward. It certainly would be a good return from our first season back in what we probably consider proper European football. Anthony, we're going to dissect the match against Parma. Now, what do you think went wrong? And there's been a lot of people who I would be very critical of the performance against Parma. There's people who put the blame onto the referee's performance. My personal opinion would be that if you're Inter, the referee shouldn't be in the equation when you play the likes of Parma. You should have scored enough goals against them, particularly at home, that it makes the referee essentially an irrelevance. But there are a lot of people that are putting the blame on the referee for what happened. How would you analyze what went on?
The referee had a couple of incorrect decisions, but that's not the reason why we lost the fixture. The reason why we lost the fixture is because our mental capacity to close out a match is still very, very poor. I think it was Ian who mentioned it at the start of this episode, something about us pressing really, really hard against Tottenham in the opening 20 to 30 minutes and then just dropping off before half time. This isn't something that just happens against Tottenham. This happens in a lot of our fixtures, more fixtures than not. So what happens is we try to burst out the gates, guns blazing, and if a side is able to contain our initial 20 to 30 minute press, then they're going to actually end up on the front foot for the second half of the first half and probably the first half of the second half as well. So the longer it takes us to be clinical, the longer it takes us to bury our chances, the weaker we become mentally, and then we start seeing real inconsistencies in our team. Players like Brozovic misplacing passes. I mean, he was a completely different player against Parma than he was against Spurs. I wasn't happy with the performance against Parma. It was an 11 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday night in Sydney, which is a prime time viewing for me. But my eyes were starting to go before the 45-minute mark. We were just dire, in my opinion. Even our attack, even though we had most of possession, it was just that clinicalness in the final third trying to get over the line. It was almost non-existent. It was like 75% well done, but now we have absolutely no idea how to go on from there. So the goal that was scored against us, it was just typical. Loaned out, Inter player, newly promoted side, scores a goal, says he didn't want to score a goal, and that's it.
Yeah, and I would also I sound like a broken record, but I would have picked up on Handanovic actually for the goal against Spurs and for the match against Parma. But rather than me sounding like a broken record and saying the same things that I've said over and over again, I give it over to Alessandro. Particularly because I have a bugbear over Handanovic, how would you have analysed his performance in the two matches?
And only in 2 matches. I think the whole beginning of this season is awful. I don't want to blame too much the performance against Tottenham. I think the goal was just not so lucky. There was not too much to do. And he did make a couple of good saves against Tottenham, but against Parma, that was his read of the trajectory of the ball. And if you are a top class goalkeeper, is something that you cannot do. and did the same against Torino, and even worse there. So I don't know what's happening with him. And I was listening to a couple of podcasts these days, and everybody's saying, it seems to be slow and not able to read the game as it was used to. And in my opinion, it was never like one of the best goalkeeper around. So if he's now getting even worse, I don't know. I don't think. Probably now we have the rest of the team at a good level, and now the goalkeeper that, in my opinion, is one of the most important position on the field. Now we have to find a replacement for that. So that's not a good start.
I would say that I wouldn't put the whole of the blame on. I think even as much as I have an issue with him, I think it would be grossly unfair to put the mental fragility of our team completely at his door. But I do genuinely think that if you've got a strong goalkeeper and somebody that you're completely confident in playing in goal, then the team as a whole relaxes a little bit more and has a little bit more confidence. I always remember Kevin Ratcliffe coming off the pitch, having played for Wales this years ago, and behind him, Mark Crossley had been playing because Neville Southall was injured, and Wales had gotten a real hiding, and Ratcliffe quite openly said, "Look, I just want to say sorry to Mark Crossley. Maybe it comes across as nasty or something, but it wasn't meant in that way at the time." He said, "I'm sorry to Mark Crossley. I've been playing in front of Neville Southall for so long that I've gotten into the habit of, if I can't make the tackle without running the risk of conceding a foul, I let the ball through because I know Neville can handle it," sort of thing. It wasn't as arrogant or as nasty as that perhaps sounds, the way he put it across, but it was basically saying, "Look, I've had the confidence of playing in front of Neville Southall for the best part of at least 10, if not 15 years. And that's the confidence that I have. And sometimes it takes you time to adjust." Well, at the same time, if you've not got that confidence, then you know that you've got to do your job, because there isn't the security behind you to fix things if you mess up. I don't know, Ian, would you think there's any merit in saying that?
Well, to be honest, I think Handanovic, he needs competition. The second choice keeper, Padelli, isn't going to get a game probably till the Coppa Italia. And the third choice, Tommaso Berni, I mean, that's a joke. That's just like the nice guy of the group. Like, he's not there to challenge, he's not there. I don't even know what he's doing there. I don't like Handanovic, the way he pushes things out in the 6-yard box and sometimes just completely switches off. But the other night, like people were saying about, he kept us in the game and all, the other night he did, but there were saves that you would expect your keeper to make.
Yeah.
Like, and on the goal against Spurs, I mean, he flops at it and pushes it into the net. I mean, why not just tip it on over the bar? Does he have to flop at it?
And that's what my biggest issue with him is. For example, the Tottenham goal, I think with the first shot, he could have punched it, he could have turned it around or over. Potentially, it wasn't even that fast, he could have caught it. And then the second shot doesn't happen, so the goal doesn't happen. That's you've just sort of put into a few words my biggest problem with him, in that he'll make what other people would call a save, because I actually wouldn't call it a save. A save to me is you stop the ball, but you clear the danger. He'll he'll get his hands to the ball, but it'll flop in front of the goal. And if there's not a defender there to clear it, then it's just prolonging the inevitable, as
Well,
we've
that's it.
seen.
And your
Yeah,
defenders are going to get closer to your keeper, and just that's going to invite more pressure. You know what I mean?
yeah, and that's
Can I
where
just
I
chime
would
in for a sec?
go on.
I think I'd agree with all our points at the moment, but can I just ask, because I'm not really bothered to search it, how old is Handanovic at the moment? Does anyone know off the top of their head?
I think he's
I think
36.
30. I was going to
Yeah.
say 34, 35. Yeah.
Okay, so in this age bracket here, I remember Andrew mentioning about a month ago or so on a podcast that, this is still years where goalkeepers tend to perform well. They've got a much more prolonged life expectancy football-wise, if you want to say. But how many goalkeepers do you know in football that are actually still consistently impressing around that age bracket? I'm only 26 years old, and I can only relay Buffon off the top of my head, who has been able to consistently stay at that level. You've got to remember, Iker Casillas stopped performing well at around age 32. And when I put up a matrix of Casillas versus Handanovic, as much as I think Handanovic did us well in his career, Iker Casillas is always going to be a much better keeper than Samir Handanovic. And, you only have to look at some of the performances, the first team performances that Peter Cech is dishing out for Arsenal in the Premier League to realize that, I don't care how long a goalkeeper's life expectancy is. If you have more versatile competition, as Ian said, someone in their mid-20s or late 20s who's athletic, who's dynamic, who's ready to break through, that needs to happen. So I'm starting to think that maybe we don't have as much of a problem with Handanovic as we have a problem with our club's ability to identify a potential problem in Handanovic, and that it needs to be rectified ASAP. And I still think Handanovic is giving 100% for us. But unfortunately, his 100% output isn't good enough anymore. So as a club, we need to identify that and have the balls to say, thank you, Samir, but you're probably a second choice now at best. Let's get some fresh blood in here.
Sorry, yeah, Ian's actually right. He's 34, and he's born right in the middle of the summer. So he's 34 for the rest of the season. It's not like he's 35 in November or anything. But I would be agreeing with that in the sense that Julio Cesar would have always known that if he didn't perform, there was a goalkeeper that was almost the equal of him to go in and take over. If Cesar had a bad he I don't think he ever lost his place to Taldo on a long-term basis, but if he didn't perform, then he knew that Taldo could step in, and I think that Ian's point is right, that Handanovic needs to feel hot breath on his neck, rather than just having a cushy time of knowing that he's in that spot and that's his. I would agree with you, Anthony, in the sense that goalkeepers performing at their top level into their mid and late 30s. The only two that spring to my mind, and people will know that I have a massive admiration for Neville Southall, but I would say Neville Southall and Buffon. I mean, Southall was people rubbish Southall because they think, oh, well, Everton for a long part of his career didn't do anything. But to be perfectly honest, Everton would have been in Division 1, potentially even Division 2, if they hadn't had Neville Southall. That is just a simple fact. The amount of times that he saved them, and that was in relegation battles, and Everton were a team that shouldn't have been in the Premier League at that time, only for Southall keeping them in there.
Can I add one?
Yeah.
So I think Auxilio and the rest of the staff notice the same thing we're saying right now, because I'm pretty sure they were trying to get the PSG goalkeeper Areola, yeah, for the next season. I think the contract was expiring, so they were trying to make a move and with the Buffon coming in the team, they were trying to push for him to come at Inter. I don't know if he will join our team next year, but I wouldn't be so sad if he's gonna join us. I think he's a really good goalkeeper and young.
As someone who watches a bit of French football every now and again, and particularly Paris Saint-Germain, hearing his name linked with us wouldn't fill me with a huge amount of confidence. Anyone, to be perfectly honest, anyone who can't keep his place ahead of Kevin Trapp on a permanent basis, I think there's questions to be asked, and there's some performances I've seen from him for Paris Saint-Germain that have been really dodgy. But I don't know where the alternative comes from, but if at least in that sense they are looking at alternatives. Ian, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to go through the club that you're setting up. Obviously I've spoken about it, but I think it's always better if it comes from the horse's mouth. So if you want to plug it, it's your chance.
Thank you. Yeah, it was me and another fella, Mark McDermott. He got on to me about starting one up in the north in Belfast here, because the closest one to us, as I know, is Interclub Dublin, but I'm not sure if that's continually active or not. So Interclub London after that, which I'm currently an active member. Well, anyway, we came with the idea of getting interest to see if we could start one. We're sitting at about 28 potential members, and we needed 25 by the end of September. So, the forms are going into Inter to officially start the club, and Lavery's Bar in Belfast will be hosting matches for members.
Excellent.
Just wanted to say, if anyone knows of anyone interested, either message me on Facebook at Ian Carr, and my Twitter handle's Fieri_1908. Just fire me a message and we'll get you into the group.
Yeah, and it's not you're welcoming. I know that you're welcoming members from
from the Republic of Ireland, Scotland, England, all around the UK, basically.
Yeah. Yes. The UK and Ireland. Anyone who's interested is welcome to give you a bell. Yeah. Just moving on very quickly, I did say that we'd touch quickly off a couple of the strange goings on at Juventus. The disgusting behaviour of Douglas Costa last weekend. Alessandro, because you're in Italy at the moment, you're on the ground. Obviously, you have better access to Italian media than we have as you're in the country at the moment. What's the reaction to this?
As always, there is the Juventus fan club, the Juventus supporters. They are trying to minimize the thing, blaming the adversary, and trying to say they're it's part of the game. But this is not part of the game. This is just a stupid and disgusting thing that it shouldn't happen. And that's nothing else to say. I mean, this is something that the more you talk about, the more I don't know. I don't even want to talk about, honestly. I think this thing, the players should get, 4 or 5 games off the field, and that's it. And it's gonna learn, and show everybody that this kind of thing is not tolerated, and that's it.
Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest and say that I wouldn't care who it was. If it was an Inter player, I'd want him out the club. I'd want him sacked, and I would want an example made of him that we as a club are better than that. We as a club have certain standards. I don't agree with somebody striking out at somebody else. I don't. I think there's ways that you can solve problems better than that. But if you hit somebody or you kick out at them on a football field, we've got to be honest. It goes on. It happens. That's part of football life. Doesn't make it right, but it doesn't. It's not outrageous either. Whereas, correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't watching the match live, but he did he. Well, actually, go with one of you. Anthony, did you watch the match live? Did you see the incident, or Ian?
Yeah, I actually did tune in to watch the end of the match, and yeah, it was bizarre, really, when you see Douglas Costa kick out and then raise the elbow. I'm thinking to myself, here we go, because it's towards the end of the match and it's 2-1. Obviously, every official and their pet is going to turn a blind eye in the last few minutes. But then Douglas goes on to do something that even the most biased or corrupt of officials wouldn't be able to overlook. It's disgusting. It's putrid. It's one of those things that oversteps all sorts of boundaries. And as you said, if that was somebody in our club, I'd be really questioning what our club would do in terms of taking action against a player like that. Just comparing it to the incident that Cristiano Ronaldo got sent off for in the Champions League, to me, Cristiano tapping Murillo on the head is a sign of frustration and is a sign of something that can happen in football. And while that was great to see him get sent off, I don't necessarily think that's a red card. But to me, the Douglas Costa incident is a 6, 7, 8, 10 match ban, in my opinion. It's just, the sport can't have stuff like that. It's gross.
Yeah, my understanding is
no
that
sport. It's not just about sport. It's about being human, It's like what happened in the Cristiano Ronaldo case is part of the game. I can understand that, and honestly, I don't even understand why I gave the red card. What happened with Douglas Costa, it doesn't matter if it was a soccer field or on the street, or it's just something that you don't do to another person. That's it.
Yeah, and my understanding of it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of it, because I actually haven't seen it apart from a few of the memes that have gone around Twitter and Facebook, is that he actually spat full in the face of the Sassuolo player. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
In his mouth, like in the direction of his mouth, like he aims for the lips.
I don't know how he kept his head. Like, I'd have just seen red. I'd have been all over him.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think I'm not sure I said it to all of you or if I said it to Anthony, but it's something where I would never like to see somebody do that, but if somebody is going to do that, I'd like to see him do it to a Roy Keane type, let's say, or a Walter Samuel type, because
or Vinnie Jones.
I don't, because I genuinely don't think Douglas Costa would be in any fit shape to ever enter a football field again if he was to do that. But then he's probably, it's a cowardly act, so he probably pick and choose his victims, and
100%.
I just think you have to make an example, and it really throws. I mean, if you can at all throw Juventus morality anymore into the quagmire, I think it really asks serious questions. If somebody like that has to be shown the door if you want to be taken seriously as a football club, I think. And I don't understand how any supporter, genuine supporter, can defend that, because I would like to think that I certainly wouldn't if it was an Inter player.
The league doesn't happen. The league doesn't help either. They should be setting the example. Like 4-match ban's a joke.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to show the Serie A brand all around the world, and they're letting that go for a 4-match ban. I mean, Icardi was banned, was it last season, for kicking the ball and going past the referee's head for 2 matches. Like the severity of the cases is massive.
Yeah, and I wouldn't condone what Icardi did either, but obviously, I mean, it's very, very different. And even the danger of the complete void of respect that you must have for somebody to spit at them, and
That's it. Yeah, he also had no remorse. I mean, the apology that he sent out to everyone except the actual player who he spat on, and then comes out the day after that, says, you don't know what he said to me. Well, tell us what he said to you.
Yeah. But I don't care. I personally don't care what he said to him. There's nothing that justifies that action.
Yeah, but it's like these racial slurs were being claimed, and like, oh, you don't know what he said to me. Well, tell us if it was racist. You know what I mean? Then it can be dealt with.
Yeah.
It's the same excuse Zidane said after hitting Materazzi in the chest.
Yeah.
Same thing.
The only thing that I would say with Zidane, and I hold my hand up and say I have a bias towards Zidane. He's quite simply the best outfield player I've seen in my lifetime. It wasn't right, and I don't condone it, but he physically struck rather than, I still would make a distinction between what Zidane did and spitting at somebody, and I'd also make a distinction in that if you look at how Zidane did it, again, doesn't make it right. He didn't actually go to hurt, to seriously hurt Materazzi, I don't think. If you want to...
Well, that's it. They could have headbutted him in the face.
Yeah. If you want to hurt somebody with a headbutt, you aim for their nose, basically. I'm not saying it's something that anybody should do, but that's how you do it, It's not that I'm advocating it. Sounds like I am, but no, I'm genuinely not.
Andrew's practicing for his next walk down Turin, guys. That's what he's doing.
Exactly. Teaching everybody, if you have to hit somebody, hit him in the nose, okay? Just take some notes next time.
And Zizou, if you're listening, you can take that as a lesson. No, but I'm just trying to make the distinction of, he hit him in a part of the body that it's not likely to cause any severe damage to him.
I was just talking about the excuse of the day after,
No, I absolutely agree.
Not an excuse, it's like, I understand you're frustrated, I understand, at that point you're not like reasoning, but the day after, you should have used that as an excuse. You should just apologize and, be a better player next time. Don't say, oh, well, but he said this and that. That's whatever he said. That's not enough to justify that. You just apologize and don't do it again. And you set the example, like, even in the apologies, because otherwise on a football, like a junior team or some kids that can use the same excuse. Oh, well, but I spit the guy because he said something about my mom, and they're just kids. That's the example you have to set. Like, apologize, say, I did something really wrong. I'm sorry, and nobody should do that.
And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I just finished watching a rugby match from the Welsh Premier League, and I'll be perfectly honest. If you did that on a rugby field, I don't think you'd come off it. I genuinely don't think you'd be able to walk off it. It's just, I don't know, we can't say anything more than that. Although I would agree with Alessandro and Anthony, I didn't think the Ronaldo red card was a red card. I really didn't see that much in it, to be perfectly honest. Although I think his reaction showed just how much of a child he is. It would put you in mind of a petulant 3-year-old. It's it really. But anyway, we'll move on from it. And just before we wrap up, we do like to bring a history, sort of history section to the show each week, and I'm going to talk about the fact that it's coming up to 20 years that we've been in partnership with Pirelli, and they are designing, apparently there's a special commemoration shirt that's being designed. I did put it up on Twitter. I think everybody who saw it thought it was well, my own personal opinion is it looked like something that a tramp would wear. It's literally a combination. If you haven't seen it, go and look it up. You'll be able to find it. It was on FC Inter News during the week, and we put it up on Twitter. It's a combination of the 20 home shirts that we've played in since we've been in partnership with Pirelli, and it just looks like somebody's got. It's almost like
it's actually painful to look at.
Yeah,
painful.
It puts me in mind of it's probably only known in this part of the world. Maybe it's travelled, I don't know, but the comedy program Steptoe and Son, where Harold comes home with different examples of squares of wallpaper to put up on the wall, and his dad is saying, well, how much is this going to cost? We don't have that kind of money. And Harold says, oh, it doesn't matter, it's going to make the place look nicer. And the dad said, well, how many bits have you got? And he shows him a big pile of pieces of wallpaper. And he says, well, that's it. Bung all the bits up. I don't mind it looking awful if it doesn't cost anything. It's when it costs money that it bothers me. But I mean, this sort of thing would put you in mind of that. It's just like as if somebody's got random pieces of material that just happen to be blue and black and shoved them all together to make some kind of monstrosity of a thing. I genuinely can't see it catching on. Go on,
I'm surprised they didn't add the Sprite kit to it.
Yeah, the Sprite kit, yeah. And the one that caused the joke when we lost to the Israeli side, that Hapoel Beersheva, the beer always beats Sprite, Anthony, go on.
I was going to say the only difference between that comedy show and what we're talking about here now is that if Pirelli and Inter were to release it, it would cost the average person probably about €90 to €100 to buy that absolute monstrosity of a strip. I haven't read anything about it actually being released into any Nike outlets or anything like that, but if it was, you can't imagine it would be discounted by any way, shape or form.
No.
So I'm confused. Are they supposed to play with that thing on?
I hope not. I definitely
really
hope
hope
not. Even
not.
for one game. Not even for one game.
The only thing that I would say about it is it's genuinely that hideous, that loud, that sort of putrefying that it could have an effect on the opposition. Rather than searching the ball, they're looking for the toilet, and it could give us an advantage. It could give us an advantage in that sense.
If you have a bad streaming, I think you don't have any problem. But if you have HD, that could be a problem.
This thing could cause seizures, I think, in people, to be perfectly honest. I'm just going to wrap up very quickly by we did mention the Primavera side last week. They won their first match. The Inter women's team played their first match of the season in the women's Coppa Italia, and they won 1-0. They won 1-0 against. Sorry, that's when I was looking for. I was looking for Handanovich's age. They beat Milan. So a derby. They beat Milan 1-0 in the first group phase last weekend. Alessandro, you're probably the best person to ask on this. Certainly on UK television, women's football is becoming more and more commonplace, as both from a live point of view, live coverage point of view, and from highlights programs and so on. I haven't come across any live coverage in Italy. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, of the women's side of the game. Is there any that I've missed, or is it something that you see coming down the pipeline quickly, or is it something that you don't think is realistic in the next while?
No, I don't think it's realistic at all, honestly. I think they just start now to talk about like the young teams for the big clubs, like the Primavera side. They start showing some game in the cable, like Sky. At least that was a couple of years ago. I hope they still do that. But for the women's side, unfortunately, there is nothing going on. I do remember, though, as a kid, there was Tele Monte Carlo at the time, La Sette more recently, that every now and then was showing some game of the, I don't know, Italia, the woman national team. But other than that, here, or honestly in the US, neither, they don't show anything that side, and it's, I don't know, really sad. Now even FIFA has on the game, they have the woman option, so it's too bad.
I think it's something that needs encouraging. I think just in the interest purely of balance, because as I mentioned, I was watching a rugby match there from the Welsh Premier League, and she's not a Premier League manager, but she's a manager of a rugby team. She's the first female manager of a rugby team in the world, and she was actually one of the pundits on the rugby show. And it's becoming more and more common, even in Ireland, for example. The women's rugby matches are always televised on the main broadcaster here. And the women's football is becoming more and more common, that you'll see it on television in the UK, and apparently it does get a following. And it was just particularly as from Inter's point of view, Regina Baresi has a profile in Italy with having been a pundit on Rai and so on. I just wondered whether it would be something that would take up. But do you think that there isn't interest there in the public, or do you think it's something that the television is slow to catch on to, or do you just think that it's something people wouldn't watch?
I don't think in Italy they're open-minded enough to accept that. I know that it's sad, but while in the U.S., since they're kids, they start playing co-ed, and if they have a male team of every sport, they need to have also the other side. In Italy, they're still living in this world with like the woman does one thing and the man does the other thing, and the man plays soccer and the woman is doing, I don't know, shopping and cooking and that kind of old style mentality. And people is surprised if, I don't know, a girlfriend of a friend is following soccer. Is something like shocking. And I don't know, it's one of the reasons why I left the country, honestly.
I mean, it is a beautiful country, and the people are very, very friendly, very warm people.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying it's all bad. No.
Yeah. But I mean, it's truth. It's the truth of everywhere. There's good and bad everywhere. And the things that I would change about Wales, as I'm sure Ian and Anthony would say about where they're from, but it's just it's a fact of life that nothing is perfect. Anyway, I think we've spoken enough tonight, and my thanks to Ian, Anthony, and Alessandro for joining me, and I'll sign off with Forza Inter.
Thanks, Andrew. Forza Inter. Nice to speak again, guys.
Thanks for having me on. It was good to meet you all. Forza Inter.
Thank you, guys. Forza Inter.